Good evening, everyone. Nice to have you with me this evening. Like you would have read on the creative, I'm going to be talking about assessment today, but more specifically, I'll also be talking about higher order thinking skills. So let me just admit the last few people in, and then we should be ready to begin. All right. So I'm Vasundhara Kaul, and I think for the longest time, one of my favorite topics as part of learning, of course, as an educator, I love being in the classroom. I love being with people with whom I interact. But I think one of my favorite topics while I was doing my B.Ed as well was understanding of higher order thinking and assessments. I don't know why I took such a liking to it, and I was really, really interested even at that time. And as years passed, I developed my own understanding of it, and also added on with, every time I interact with other educators, I add on to my kitty. So the request today would be that you can feel free to interact. You can feel free to put up your hand and ask questions or share your ideas, because it's a short presentation otherwise, but can have scope of a lot of discussion, because I think assessments and evaluations is something that we all do as part of our regular roles. And with the changing times, assessments and evaluations are expected to change, but there is a lot more and a lot more scope that can take place. And also, post COVID, there's been a lot of discussion over it, because for the last couple of years, we have not really been able to test in the way that we were used to testing earlier. And yet we see that in certain cases there can be learning gaps, and in other cases children have managed to learn as well. So I'm going to be talking about this topic in a little while, but before that, there's a little activity for all of you. So there's a passage that I will show after this slide, and once you have read through the passage, I'll give you about a minute and a half to read through. It's a short passage about a generic topic. Once you have read through the topic, I want you to develop any two questions that you would ask the children based on that topic. Okay, so it's a slide long information. So take about a minute to read it carefully, and then develop any two questions that you would ask children. Say this was a reading comprehension passage that you had given to them, right? And once you're done, just don't type it out in the chat immediately. I will tell you when to type your questions out in chat. It is then that you type your questions out in chat. Okay, so once I change the slide, just read through the passage carefully. It's a generic topic, so all of you should be able to relate to it. And then think of two questions that you would want to ask children. Say you were giving children this passage as a reading comprehension passage. Okay, so this is the passage. It's 6:04. You have time till 6:05 or 6:06. Maybe some of you may take a little longer to read. So take that much time, and then once you have read through the passage, think of two questions, and I'll tell you when to put those two questions down on chat. I hope all of you have understood what I'm asking you to do. Enjoy the read, and once you're done, then just think of two questions, please. Those of you who are ready, like you've been able to read the passage, you can feel free to put your questions down on chat. What would you ask children? if you were giving this to children as a reading comprehension passage, right? And some of you just joined us. So if you could read the passage quickly and think of any two questions that you would ask children once they have read the passage. So supposing this was a passage that you were giving to them, what would the two questions be? Those of you who read the passage, can you put the your questions down in chat, please? Yes, Shaila ma'am and Lavanya ma'am. Can you put it down in chat instead of unmuting? You can unmute and answer later. As of now, since everyone's reading, I'll appreciate if you can type it out, and then you can unmute and share also once everyone's done. Shaila ma'am, Lavanya ma'am, you have any other questions apart from this? If you were putting up your hand to share, just give everyone 1 more minute, and then you can unmute and answer. All right, Shalini ma'am or Shaila ma'am, would you want to unmute and answer?
Ma'am, it's not audible. Can you speak little louder?
You can't hear me at all?
I can hear you, but not clearly.
Is that true for everyone? What about the others? Am I audible?
I can hear you clearly.
Ma'am, very clear.
Yes, ma'am. Clearly audible.
Yes,
You're
ma'am.
audible, ma'am.
Yeah, ma'am, if you could use headphones, maybe network issues at your end, then. For the others, you can either put your questions down on chat or you can unmute and share, please. Lavanya ma'am, Shaila, Shalini, you have your hands up. And anyone else who might want to share.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So Anjali ma'am is saying, how can we define sustainable development? Okay. That's a question from her. What about the others? Anyone else who would want to share what they would ask the children? What is the tone of the writer? Interesting. Okay. Why is the need for sustainable development? Okay. Yes, for those of you who have your hands up, would you want to share? Or anyone else who doesn't have their hand up? See, I would request everyone to, answer or feel free to answer. I don't expect you to switch on your videos. It's the evening. You might be tired, but you can feel free to answer because this entire session is designed in a manner that it is interactive. So, Deepti ma'am, Lavanya, anyone who's wanting to unmute and answer? Okay, so when you're looking at anything like this, so I got a couple of questions on the chat. Anjali ma'am, thank you so much for your contribution. Baljinder ma'am is saying, what is pollution? State its consequences on earth. All right, that's an interesting one as well. There are various ways in which we can ask children questions about the same topic, right? We can ask them to define something. We can ask them to explain something. We can ask them to compare. Shakshi ma'am is saying, how does pollution affect the environment? So about any given topic, you can ask children various questions in various ways. So how do you decide whether you have to ask a what question or a how question or a comparison question? What decides that for you? Can anyone share? How do you decide whether you want to ask a what question or a how question or a why question or a compare question? How do you decide that?
Depending on the class level, ma'am.
Depending on the class level. Okay. So, ma'am, Uma ma'am, if I may ask you, what classes do you teach? And then what do you think is the appropriate type of questions that can be asked to your children?
I teach the 9th and the 10th.
Okay.
And
so,
it would actually, since I am actually an English teacher, I would actually go, paragraph wise.
okay.
Starting from, since you've asked only for 2 questions, I think initially it would be I mean, since the webinar is on higher order thinking, then I think we can't, I mean, as per the level, or even if it's a 5 marker passage, then I think we ask the what and the how initially, and then move on to the higher order questions.
Okay. So, according to you, how will you draft a higher order question? I'm only asking you. I know the webinar is about 1 hour long, and I am supposed to talk about that, but I just want to understand, what does the group think about higher order questions, or what do they understand from it? So you are a 9th, 10th grade teacher. You're a secondary teacher, right? So
Yes, ma'am.
give me one example, and you're an English teacher. So give me any one
Yes, ma'am.
example of a higher order question that you will ask your children. What do you
Usually it
think
will
is
be
a higher order question? It doesn't matter whether it is completely
an
correct.
application based question.
Okay, an application based question. Fair enough. Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else? Anyone else who how do you decide? How do you decide that what questions to ask your children? Whatever age groups
But
you're
it
teaching, what
is,
is the
it
process
can
of
be,
decision? Yes,
yes, ma'am.
Champakali ma'am.
Yeah, I feel higher order thinking skills or questions are those which are analytical questions. Not exactly the children will be getting the answers from
Okay,
the paragraph itself, but they have to go beyond,
okay,
analyze what it is talking about, and accordingly they will get the answers.
okay. Fair enough. Okay. Anyone else who wants to share before I move on? I just want to get a sense of what the group is thinking. And then, of course, I will decode what I'm planning to do today. Anyone else who
Ma'am,
has
can
any?
I?
Yes, Anjali ma'am, please.
I think I have to decide what my objectives are. Then only I
Okay,
can decide what sort of questions I may ask to my children.
super, super. Brilliant.
Uh,
Okay, because unless you know what is it that you're trying to test, okay, any question can be a lower order question or a higher order question or an incorrect question, right? Because whatever you are wanting to test, so supposing you are expecting the child to write an essay. Now if you're expecting the child to write an essay, what are you trying to test? Whether the child can ideate, whether they can write sequentially or not, whether they can understand a topic and write based on that topic. Those are the things you are trying to test, right? Yes, we do deduct marks for spellings. Yes, we do deduct marks for grammar. But technically, if you are looking at the learning outcome of an essay, you would place the ability to ideate at a higher level than being able to spell correctly, right? When you are evaluating for spellings, then you will evaluate for spellings, and accordingly your question should be designed accordingly, which are vocabulary based or whatever. So we'll come back to these examples in a little while. So when, some of you gave me a few examples on the chat, but there could be some of these that you may have thought of. Did you think of a question which was based on factual content? Did you think of a question which was based on the main theme? Some of you used the word application. I think Uma ma'am said that, you do need children to do application. Champakali ma'am also said beyond the text. So really, are you expecting children to think a little bit beyond what is given in the text, or apply what is given in the text, or create new information based on the text, or based on whatever they are learning? So there are these various types of questioning patterns that can happen depending, like Anjali ma'am rightly said, on the objective of what you are planning to do. Right. So your objective could plain simple be, does the child remember what I taught them yesterday? But if your objective is that, can the child apply what I taught them, what the formula I taught them yesterday, into a new question or a new concept, that is going to change how you ask them a question this morning. Right. So when I'm therefore I thought of splitting up the way in which I was going to do the session today. Yes, of course, we have to talk about higher order thinking. So what really is our understanding of higher order thinking? One of the most common ways of decoding higher order thinking questions and assessments is to look at Bloom's taxonomy, right? And you also look at why a hot question is effective or not, what makes sense and why does it make sense. And of course, what do you do when you actually have to do a higher order thinking evaluation, right? So we're going to be doing that. So first is, what really is higher order thinking? Sorry, there's a little overlap on that. Let me just correct that, because otherwise you'll not be able to read that. So when you're looking at higher order thinking, you have, let's look at a few definitions, okay? Some definitions, of course, are given by the person who's also come up with the taxonomy. So we have all heard of Bloom, and one of the definitions of higher order thinking was given by him. And of course, there are others as well. So let's look at some of these definitions so that we are able to understand what we mean by higher order thinking. Okay, so thinking is a cognitive task. Do all of you agree? It is a task which your brain requires to do, right? But what all is included in thinking? When you're thinking of something, what are the other functions that your brain is going through? Or what are the types of thinking that you are aware of? What are the types of thinking that you are aware of, or what are the brain functions that you are aware of? So if you look at Bloom's definition, he's saying higher order thinking is an abstract ability that is in the cognitive domain that includes analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, right? So what does the word analysis mean? What does the word analysis mean? English definition. I'm not asking you what was Bloom's understanding of analysis. I'm not even asking you the taxonomy. I'm just saying, what does the word analysis mean? Can anyone share with me what does the word analysis mean? You can Google and
Ma'am,
answer also. Yes, please.
ma'am, analysis is more of breaking down things to learn more in detail.
Super. So you have a topic, you analyze that topic. Bhupinder is saying judging. Yes. So I have something in front of me. I could be doing a judgment on it. I have a concept in front of me, or I've been taught a concept. I'm breaking it down further to understand it a little more, right? So I am doing an analysis. What do I do in a synthesis? What do I do in a synthesis?
Synthesis is more of combining different concepts.
Absolutely. Are you a science person, LJ ma'am?
No, ma'am. I'm actually humanities. I teach
So
political
you are
science.
doing a social studies definition. See, so that's brilliant, right? So when we are synthesizing in science also, we are putting things together. But this concept is really like what LJ ma'am is saying, that you are bringing smaller concepts together and making it into a whole. So both ways requires a cognitive functioning to take place, which means your brain needs to use that. Now they're talking about a cognitive domain. What are the other two domains that we generally cater to as educators? There are three
The
domains
affective
that we cater:
domain.
the affective domain and the psychomotor domain. So you are catering to the emotions of the child, you're catering to the physical development of the child, and you're catering to the cognitive development of the child, which includes all forms of thinking. And within that thinking pattern, what Bloom is saying is, if higher order thinking has to happen, which means, what does higher order thinking mean? That it is more complex even for the brain. There are multiple steps involved when you have to do analysis. There are multiple steps involved when you have to be able to do synthesis. And of course, there are multiple steps involved when you have to do evaluation. So Bhupinder a little while ago had said judging. Judging is more closely related to evaluation. But of course, as a matter of judgment, all three forms of higher order thinking, you will be doing some judgment or the other, because you're trying to figure out whether it is making sense to you or not, right? So when you're looking at higher order thinking, you are looking at the ability to break things up and make sense of them, to bring concepts together and make sense of them, to evaluate whether something is working, not working, etc. Right? One other definition of higher order thinking has been given by Resnick, is a mental process which includes classification, induction, deduction, and reasoning. What is induction and deduction? Have any of you heard of the inductor-deductor method? Have you heard of the inductor-deductor method? I'm a maths person, so I'll guess, Pinky ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Induction basically here refers to what the child induces from the particular material that is given to people to read or the children to read. And after induction, they come to a conclusion that is deduction.
Okay. So can you give me an example? Would you be able to give an example, or anyone else
Ma'am,
can give?
can I try?
Yes, please, Anjali ma'am.
Ma'am, I think inductive method is like, on the basis of observation, what
Hmm.
we reason with. And deductive is through my basically widely accepted any concepts, what I know. On the basis of that, I give the judgment.
Okay, all right. Elizabeth ma'am, Vidita.
Yes, ma'am. I feel induction is when you are giving the rules. Like, suppose you're teaching grammar, you give the rules, and then you teach them the rules and you give the example.
Hmm.
Okay, deduction is when the example is given, like a sentence is given, and then through the example, you derive the rules.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the other way around, but the concept I think is
Yeah, the
Hello, ma'am.
concept is right, but think whether it's the other way around. Okay,
Hello, ma'am.
and we'll come
okay.
back.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Vidita.
Yes, it is like a inductive is like a from unknown to the we are asking the question, explaining, and the final outcome will be the known concept. They will be the concept will be explained at the end of the. We will start with the unknown concept, and the deductive means that they are knowing about that, and they are we are asking the question which will lead to the concept which are they are not knowing at all. So it is a known to unknown and unknown to known. That is the inductive and the deductive method. That is what I have known. I am not sure I am right or wrong, but that is what I have known about that.
You people should be all of you. You are educators. You are experienced, which is why I keep goading everyone to answer, because you learn from each other, and beautiful examples by everyone. Thank you so much. Anyone else who wants to share? Shanta, I just saw your hand, and Geeta ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am. I would like to
Good
say
evening.
in simple words, if I'm not wrong, we call it as two methods, that which is called as egg rule egg method or rule egg rule method. In B.Ed, we used to study this. Egg rule means example, and then that which is known to us, and then from there we teach them something, a new rule that which they want to give, and then a relevant of the rule in another example. That is egg rule egg method. Another one is a rule egg rule method, that is teaching the unknown part, that is, as they say, rule, and then going for an example that which is known, and from there how it is implied, like that we get it. Am I right? If I don't think, am I right?
All of you will have to tell each other whether you are right. Everyone has given a very different way of explaining it, but well done. Okay, so I'll give you an
Thank you, ma'am.
example. I'm a maths person. I'll give you a maths example. In maths, there's this typical concept where three angles of a triangle are 180 degrees, right? Sum of three angles of a triangle are 180 degrees. If you make the children draw triangles, measure the angles with the protractor, and every time they add the three angles, they are arriving at the 180 degrees. They are looking at that example and arriving at the rule, right? And the reverse could be true. You tell them that this is the rule, and you get them to prove that that is the rule by drawing out triangles, right? So in inductor deductor method, you move from the unknown to the known, or the known to the unknown, or the example to the rule, and rule to the example. But why is it so important to look at this as a higher order thinking? Because you are not making it a something that is available to the child directly. You are getting the child to think. You are getting the child to arrive at their understanding one way or the other. It's not a direct understanding. It's not that the teacher has said this and the child is going to memorize it. The child is going to arrive at that understanding through a process of smaller cognitive steps, and which is why it is a higher order thinking process. Is that okay with everyone? So what you're trying to do when you're looking at higher order thinking is that the simplest form of thinking is, if I have to recall something, recollect something, right? That memory is the simplest form. Now we all keep talking about the fact that, oh, children should memorize this, or they should remember this, etc. But please understand, memorization is the simplest cognitive task. That's the basic function of the brain. All other functions that the brain does are more complex brain structures, and therefore encouraging that, developing that, makes better sense. Why does it make better sense in today's day and age? Why does it make better sense to teach children how to look at higher order thinking approaches rather than rote memorization more today than ever before? Why is it so important? Yes,
Can I try, ma'am?
try.
Ma'am, I think like as far as academic is concerned, usually in old days, listening based questions were limited. But now, if you see that all the problems, either it is maths or English or any other subjects, most of the questions are reasoning based, wherein the students have to actually see the concepts, and rather than like rote learning, they need to actually use their like logic and then answer the question. This is only for academic purpose. That is what I believe. And for the other reason, I would say that in real life also, in the practical aspects as well, they need to solve the problems not on the basis of what they have learned, but how they learn. On the basis of that, they have to basically solve any matter.
Okay, all
That's
right.
what I believe.
I'll listen to the others as well. Bindu ma'am, you have your hand up. Bindu ma'am, LG ma'am, Elizabeth ma'am, Lavanya, anyone who has their
Okay,
hand up,
thank you.
yes, go on.
See, basically, memory is considered to be lower order primarily based on my understanding. It's because those information are already available to us. Any hard drive or any pen drive is enough for recalling information. But when you're talking about why we need higher order thinking, I believe we are coaching our children to face unknown world. The world is unknown.
Yes.
It's a competitive world. So to prepare them for that, I think we need to coach them.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So like you, Anjali ma'am and LG ma'am are discussing, at the end of the day, we have Google, right? Children, the simplest question these days. So I have a teenage son. If you ask him, do you know how to cycle? Yes, mama, I will Google it. So and so, do you know how to do this? Yes, mama, I will Google it. So Googling is possible. Themselves also, they don't need to necessarily remember. Even if they were to remember, that is fine. But what is important for them to understand and be able to do is, once that information is all available, whether that information is available through Google or through other means or through interactions or whatever, what can I do with that piece of information? Can I make sense of that information, apply it? Can I make sense of that information, use it in other contexts? And that uncertain world is what we are preparing them for. So unless we are preparing them for that world in the education system itself, they're never going to be able to learn it, right? And how will you figure out whether they've picked up that skill of being able to analyze, synthesize, or evaluate, etc., unless you are building it into their evaluation patterns itself? You could be doing a very good job with your lesson. You could be doing a very interactive session, but eventually, if you don't evaluate for that skill, how will you ever know whether the child has picked up that skill or not? How will you know that the child has picked up the skill of describing something, analyzing something, or reasoning something out? Or like you said, how do they know that, if pollution is there, I'm the one responsible for it? How do they deduct that? How do they have a critical thinking approach to find solutions for climate change and all of that? So in that uncertain world, you need them to think in the higher order, because the lower order thinking is being done by machines, right? Or at least facilitated by machines. Now, all of you would be familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy, or even if you are not using it on a regular basis, at least would have heard of it. So I'm not going to go deeply into Bloom's taxonomy, but yes, I do want you to answer this question for me. What do you use the Bloom's taxonomy for? Do you use the Bloom's taxonomy for setting objectives, or do you use the Bloom's taxonomy for your entire teaching learning process? Currently, are you using the Bloom? If you are using it, if you are not using it, then you can say no on the chat. Don't use it. If you are using it, do you use it for setting objectives? Yes, Meenakshi ma'am. Or anyone who wants to unmute and tell me, what are you using the Bloom's taxonomy for? Or what have you... So Anjali is saying we do use it for the entire lesson plan. So Arya, do you use it also for the assessments?
Yes,
Do
ma'am,
you
we do.
also use it for the
Yes,
assessments?
Yes, as well.
yes, yes.
Great. So all of you who are using it through and through, congratulations to you on that, because at the end of the day, it's not only necessary for you to use it. So historically, most of us, including me, we were using Bloom's taxonomy only for setting objectives, and then we would plan our lesson and move from there. But the important bit to look at is that unless I'm bringing it in my lesson planning itself, it is not going to make sense. And then from the lesson, which is the teaching part of the lesson, if I don't bring it into my assessments, again, it doesn't make sense, because then I have taught something at a particular level, but I have never evaluated for it. So if I had not evaluated at an analyze level or an apply level or an evaluate level, it doesn't make sense at all. So your question paper designing also needs to look at it. But then how do you use the question paper designing to take care of all levels, and how do you use it to take care of the higher levels? Yes, Daksha ma'am. You have your hand up, Daksha ma'am. Go ahead and share, please. Okay, I don't know whether that was by mistake. So anyone who wants to help me explain the Bloom's taxonomy to everyone else? So what's happening in the lower order levels, or rather which ones are the lower order levels and which one are the higher order levels in the Bloom's taxonomy? So what skills are the lower order? What skills are the higher order? Does anyone want to help me do that?
Just try.
Okay, yes, Arya ma'am, try.
Well, the lower order would be right at the bottom, which we either when we say remember or knowledge. So it's like basic questions. Suppose India got freedom in 1947. So when did India get freedom? The answer would be the knowledge level.
Yeah.
And the understanding part is to suppose read a paragraph and from that derive an answer. And then application part would be the next level, wherein the knowledge that the child has gained, how does that child apply it to get a certain outcome? And then analyze.
So these are all lower order, or these are all lower order thinking?
Yes.
Okay. So remember, understand, apply, or knowledge, understand, application. These are all lower order thinking. Why are they lower order thinking? Because your cognitive brain is not getting taxed so much in doing this. This is a given. This is a given task of the brain, that it has to have memory capacity. It has to make sense of what it is seeing or being exposed to. And it should have the ability to apply that concept in a new situation. Do any of you remember the Piaget's cognitive theory? Does anyone remember the Piaget's cognitive theory? Anyone who wants to try? So Piaget was one of the ones who spoke about cognitive development in children, right? Yes, Rajkumari ma'am, you want to try?
Ma'am, is this scaffolding?
Assimilation and accommodation.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So when you're looking at any concept, right? So supposing you are being coming for this workshop, right? You're coming for this workshop. There would be some ideas that are already present in your brain, like Rajkumari ma'am also said, right? Is it scaffolding? Is it this? Right? Some of you may also be thinking, oh, I've done this somewhere, I've heard of this somewhere, or whatever. So typically, nothing goes from your short-term memory into your long-term memory unless there is a hook that is available. Okay, so if you are able to link up whatever is being shared with you with something that you know previously, then that Piaget in his language used to call it the schemas. So for every piece of information that you gather, a schema gets created in your brain. So it's like the computer chip. Okay, so the chip has a piece of information. Right now, when you encounter some new piece of information, you try and see whether there is any schema which is related to this schema or not. And then if you are able to link it, you are able to place that in your memory set. So what happens is the schema gets enhanced, and you keep building upon that piece of information. That is how younger children, when they learn colors for the first time, then they become older, then they learn a few more colors, then they become older, they learn a few more colors. So initially they know 3 colors, but then eventually they know 14 colors, and they know shades of colors, etc. So you keep building upon the original chips that you had, and when you encounter new pieces of information, you should be able to create new chips as well, or new schemas as well. Now that schema stays in your brain, and once you encounter a situation where you can apply that schema, is where you can pull out information from your brain and use that in a given situation. What Rajkumari ma'am mentioned in terms of scaffolding is also true, is also related, because if children are finding it difficult to understand or finding it difficult to apply to new situations, then as educators, you scaffold or you support that learning pattern so that the child is able to apply their knowledge in a new situation. Otherwise, maybe that knowledge is going to stay and the child will never learn how to apply it. But having said that, these will still remain the lower order thinking patterns. These are a given for the brain. This the brain has to typically do, right? So remembering, understanding, and applying are three basic functions, and therefore three lower order functions that the brain is doing. If you're asking any questions there, I'm not saying you don't need to ask questions, but if you're asking any questions which are only expecting the child to remember, it's only expecting the child to understand a concept or apply a given concept, you are not doing higher order thinking at all. Is that okay with everyone? If you are expecting the child to analyze, if you are expecting the child to evaluate an answer or create something new, that is when you will expect the child to do higher order thinking. So analysis, evaluation, and creation are all higher order thinking patterns. Creation, of course, because it has a whole lot of things which will ensure that a child creates something new out of all the pieces of information that is available to them. What are you doing in evaluating? You're critically evaluating. You're thinking whether something is making sense, not making sense, should it be used, not used, and all of that. So in that same pollution write-up that you were doing, you would possibly think and you'll ask the child to figure out which is the most polluted country in the world and how can you clean it up, or how can you clean up your city's pollution? What will you do towards it? Do you think it's impacting your health? In what ways is it impacting your health, etc.? Right? So when you're looking at the levels of the Bloom's taxonomy, remember that you cannot ignore the lower order thinking, but yes, the higher order thinking is becoming mandatory because it's important for us to build those skills in our children. Is that okay with everyone? Rajkumari ma'am, you want to add in any way, since you had put up your hand at that time? Or anyone else who wants to add to this understanding of Bloom's? Okay, then can we move on? So when you're looking at the Bloom's taxonomy, one of the other ways of looking at it also is how does the child develop a problem-solving approach, right? Or a scientific approach. What happens in a scientific approach? Are any of you aware of what's happening in a scientific approach? And please understand, even if one is a social sciences person or one has done arts throughout like me, doesn't stop you from becoming a scientific person, right? So it doesn't stop you from having a scientific temper. So there's a difference between being science or knowing science and having a scientific temper. So what is a scientific temper? What is a problem solving approach or a critical thinking approach?
I feel it should have a causal explanation kind of thing.
Okay, can you are right. Can you kind of explain it so that everyone else understands what you're saying?
Like something is like in psychology we say ki behavior happens because of some reasons. Maybe the child has some home environment affecting the child's behavior, or maybe something in the school or something like that. So we are going about the causal explanation of the present behavior when we are dealing with students, something like that.
Super. Like,
so that is a scientific temperament.
That's a scientific temperament. You are always a scientific temperament is a temperament where you are saying that if something were to occur, there will always be a trigger to it. So in the context of behavior, you're looking at it as a trigger for the behavior. In any other context, you're saying that there would be a cause for that occurrence to happen. Right? Now, you could hypothesize about what the possible answers could be, which is where your divergent thinking comes in. So you are in your divergent thinking approach. So one is the causal approach. The other aspect also is that you adopt a divergent thinking approach. What happens in a divergent thinking approach is that there's not one solution. There's not one size fits all.
More of creativity. More of creativity.
Absolutely.
It
Absolutely. So you will have creativity. You will Sakshi ma'am, like rightly is saying, I will have a hypothesis, which means I will have an assumption statement. My assumption statement will have possibilities. I will see which of those possibilities is true, try and see if I can prove that possibility, and then create something new out of it, which is exactly what is happening in the last 3 stages, right? So if I were to analyze everything that comes my way, I don't take it just because the teacher is saying it. I don't take it the way, or the teacher is also allowing me the opportunity to analyze. Just because she's saying that angles of a triangle are 180 degrees doesn't mean I should believe it. So the teacher is providing opportunities where I can test out whether the postulate is actually true or not. And can I come up with any other thought process? Can I come up with, then can I evaluate? So can I evaluate the options that are there? And like Rachna ma'am was saying, can you create something new? Can you show creativity? Now, creativity also is an interesting word that you brought up, Rachna ma'am, because creativity, unlike what a lot of us might be thinking, is not just about art and craft, right? A lot of us say, oh, I'm not creative, yeah. But we are all creative. We can all be creative in our own ways. So it's not
Ma'am, just
necessary. Yes,
want to
please,
share an
Anjali.
example for the same.
Yes, please.
For creativity. Like
Yes,
for
please.
in social science or maybe in English language, we do ask our student to make mind maps. So that is also one of the skills that children have, which is also called creativity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Abhishek, you have your hand up. Is that for attendance or is that to share something? Okay.
Ma'am, it's just for attendance.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So when you're looking at creativity, therefore, like all of you are saying, it is not just about me doing painting and drawing and whatever, right? If I am applying everything that I have learned in a fluent manner, in a confident manner, if I can, yes, Dipti ma'am. Okay. If I am applying everything that I have learned in a fluent manner, if I can elaborate and explain to others what I have done, right? I am definitely being a creative person. So I should be able to have the divergent thinking approach. I should be able to look at options that are available. And then I should also be able to explain to people what I am doing. Right. So it's not just that modern art, we pass it off as saying, oh, that is modern art, I don't understand it. But the artist has a vision, right? The artist should be able to explain what they were trying to portray. So anyone else who wants to share? Okay, so let's move on. So therefore, when you're looking at the scientific... Yes, Abhishek.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Like regarding the Bloom's taxonomy, that in many of the interviews and many of the school, I have tried to apply this Bloom's taxonomy, but many times I have failed to do so, and I don't know how to analyze that performance in the children's performance. Like I just want that.
Yeah, so I will come to that as well. But what is also important to understand is that you will not be able to analyze the performance unless you understand each of the levels of Bloom's taxonomy beyond the verbs. So the Bloom's taxonomy is not just about the verbs that are given on that table, right? If you were to say, ask if the verb is describe, are you being able to give a question where the child will be describing something? If you're giving you are saying that the child should be able to describe at the end of the session, but your question in no way is going to make the child describe. What does the word describe mean? That the child should be able to use adjectives, should be able to use descriptors, should be able to tell you something in a very pictorial, in a very descriptive manner, right? But if the question that you are asking the child is not going to make the child do any description, it falls through. And that's the disconnect we always have. Look at your learning outcome. look at what you're trying to achieve through that, and then think of what level of question you're going to ask. I'm going to come to that in a little bit. Let me just finish this piece, and then maybe if I still don't answer it by the end of the session, you can stay back and ask me to explain it more.
Sure, ma'am. You
Right.
can.
So
Sure, ma'am.
therefore, when you're looking at the Bloom's taxonomy, and this is going to become part of how you ask the question as well, are you making the child think through a scientific process? So are you asking an analysis question? Are you making the child evaluate? Are you getting them to create something new? Not necessary that everything has to be part of a written paper, but yes, whatever aspects of that are possible in a written paper or otherwise as well. So through your project-based learning or through your other activities that you may be doing, you may be getting them to create something new. You could even get them to create a prototype within the exam if you are wanting them to think in that manner, right? But sometimes creation may not be possible in the exam itself because of the time constraints, but there are ways in which you can still get them to do it. You can get them to shorten it. You can get them to just do it like a model, or like Anjali was saying, just get them to do the graphic organizer part of the creation, right? So how are they thinking? Tell me a graphic organizer of what you will do if you are going to convert this into a project. So you can use it in ways like that. Now, effectiveness of the HOT. So why is it important, or why does it work for children? Why does it work for teachers? I think you've been discussing this through bits and pieces. So let's go through this together. So significance of the HOTs for students is that they learn to apply beyond the classroom. That's something that I think some of you brought up, saying that it's not just restricted to the exam, right? At the end of the day, you are teaching them these skills so that they are able to apply these skills for life. There is, of course, usability across ways. It's also helpful for them. They gain experience within the classroom setup, and then they should be able to apply it in the real life as well. And of course, there's a lot of improved motivation because children are able to think on their own independently. So it's not just about memorization. It's just not about fitting into the formula, but it's also about having the openness to accept what children might be bringing onto the table rather than what the educator might be giving to them only, right? Now, teachers, of course, if you are bringing in higher order thinking into your classrooms, there is a whole lot of advantages that are possible. You can enhance the classroom experience. There is also application that you are, getting the children to do, and effective explanation of concepts, scope for varied teaching methodologies and modalities as well, right? So the last one, which is teaching methodologies and modalities, whether you're using project-based learning, whether you're using activity-based learning, experiential learning, or all other forms of pedagogies, all of them support higher order thinking. So if you're using project-based learning, or if you're using experiential learning or activity-based learning, most naturally you are promoting higher order thinking skills. So you are developing higher order thinking skills in the students, right? So this video I will leave with you once we end the session. I'll place the link in the chat. Let's go on to something that Abhishek also asked, and something that all of you must be looking at as well, saying that how do you, this is all fine, right? That this is higher order thinking, this must be done, this has its advantages, but how do you ensure that you are able to evaluate based for these higher order thinking skills, right? So before I go on and give some examples, etc., anyone who wants to give some examples of how they have tried it in school, like how have you tried, say, giving children an assignment or giving children a question in the exam, which ensures that higher order thinking is being tested? And we still have 15 minutes of the session left, please. I know you want your attendance, and you will get your attendance. I much rather that you participate than placing your email IDs there. Do that, but participate also. Yes, Arya ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Now, before I give the example, I just wanted to add that, the reason why we need to place higher order thinking is because we are catering to students with various intelligence levels. So if just ask the lower order questions. We are not, addressing the needs of the brilliant students in the class. So they will tend to get, bored when a lecture is going on and we are asking just mediocre questions or the lower order questions. So when we ask the higher order questions, that's where we can evaluate children among themselves as to how well they are able to apply and create. So when we ask for when we look at the example of creating, for example, if it is English subject, we can ask the students as to, if you were the writer, how would you end the given story, or what
Okay.
what kind of climax would you give for the given story? So
Okay.
that's one way wherein they can create an ending of their own.
Okay, I love the example. Okay, I love the example for two reasons. One is because you are getting children to do things which are not the straight box things, which is different, right? I think for the longest time when you and I were children, it was the same set of 4 or 5 nursery rhymes that we learned, the same set of stories that we learned, irrespective of which part of the country we studied in, and with the same morals that were defined in those stories, right? So whether it was the hare and the tortoise or the crow and the pebbles and whatever, it was a repeat of the same value system across board. So sometimes you didn't leave leeway for children to think on their own on what might have happened if the story had been written differently, right? So I love the example. I just have one correction to make, Arya ma'am, and I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so thank you for sharing. So I was waiting for someone to bring this up and then bring it onto the fold. See, please understand that when we are saying higher order thinking, we are not under any circumstances saying that only intelligent children can answer questions which are higher order thinking. Okay, or you need an average IQ or an above average IQ to be able to answer higher order thinking. Okay, so that's the first myth that we need to break. So when we're setting a question paper, doesn't mean that we make it only full of higher order thinking questions, but yes, all children must have the exposure to higher order thinking questions. Okay, now why am I saying this? The reason I'm saying this is because I also happen to be a special educator and a mental health practitioner, and I know through my teaching, and a lot of you would agree, that even if I have a learning disability, even if I have autism, even if I have ADHD, okay, unless there is an assessment which says that my IQ is low, which means there is impact on my cognitive functioning, it is safe to assume that I will have an average IQ or above. Okay, if I have an average IQ or above, which means I should be able to do at least some bit of the higher order thinking, if not everything independently. Okay, so which means you may have children who may do it very well, but you will also have children who will still do it with a little bit of scaffolding, like you were saying. Okay, and there'll be others who may be surprises for you. You may think that they'll never be able to answer something, but they may come up with such beautiful answers and may surprise you as well. So the assumption should be that most of your children, unless you have a report which tells you that this child has a cognitive impairment, and that, by the way, is going to be only 2% of any population, 2%. The rest of the 98, okay, if not the rest of the 98, maybe the rest of the 90% for sure, are children who will be able to at least do higher order thinking to a certain level. That is how the brain functions. Okay, you don't need to be a super intelligent, gifted child to be able to do higher order thinking. You need to have average IQ or more, and 90% of your children have that. There will be children who will be much higher. So there you are right, Arya ma'am, that if you don't do this, then those ones will definitely be not happy in the class at all, and they might be your biggest disruptors because they feel, oh, this is like so easy and I have no there's no challenge for me in this class, right? But for everyone else as well, you will be pushing them towards their bettering their potential if you get them to do the higher order thinking. Right now, the next couple of slides is going to answer the question on how should you ensure that you are designing your evaluation patterns correctly. Right I'm not, I know that all of you are very seasoned educators, so I don't need to tell you how the question should be formulated. I'm just going to talk about the process. Okay, because then through your own experience, you can decide through your own school rules or whatever your protocol is, you can decide how do you want to mold it. But there are these few things that should be done so that you are building in the higher order evaluations correctly and effectively, and they become useful for your students as well, right? So one is higher order evaluation should also happen during the learning as well. So it should not be left only to the question paper. Okay, so I'll give you an example. We've had this real example where there were these set of children whom we evaluated, and we noticed that all children got a very simple question wrong. Okay, so the question in the exam was differentiate between, it was an economics paper, differentiate between goods and services. So typically when you say differentiate between goods and services, what do you expect the child to answer and how do you expect the child to answer? Can someone help me with that? If I were to ask you differentiate between X and Y, A and B, whatever. So in this case, goods and services. How would you expect the child to answer the question? You're all teachers, right? If you had given that question, what is the kind of answer you will expect from them?
The characteristics of both the things, how they are different.
Okay. Shalini ma'am? Or Monica ma'am?
Characteristics and also one example each.
One example each,
Yes.
characteristics. Okay. What else will you expect?
Difference in the properties and all.
Difference in the properties, etc., etc. So you will typically expect them to draw a column and write something on the left hand side and write something on the right hand side, right? Now those could be the left hand side, right hand side could be characteristics, could be one example each, could be typically in a differentiate. The example is something that is good because then you know that the child has really understood or not, right? Elizabeth ma'am, you want to add? Elizabeth ma'am, you're saying something, sorry. Okay, I'm not sure. So you can unmute and answer when you want to. So but what did these children write? They defined goods, they defined services. Why? Why do you think they did that? Because none of them had ever heard of the word differentiate before. The teacher used to say, give differences. The teacher used to say, give two differences. The teacher used to say, what is the difference between? She had never used the word differentiate in class. This was the first time they'd ever heard of it. So most of them were unsure of what they were expected to do. So they saw goods, they saw services, they defined the goods and services because it said, maybe this is about defining. So they wrote one paragraph each and lost marks. So whatever you are planning to put in your, so what typically happens is we use a lot of, when we are setting the question paper, we are very structured. Okay, when we're setting the question paper, we are looking at how many types of questions have we
A
asked.
gallon of milk dash $4.
Yes, Pinky ma'am. Okay, sorry. So therefore, asking questions of a similar pattern during the class or during the learning is also important. So you have to do do it all during the learning as well. Familiarity has to be brought in. All other forms of testing has to be done where you get them to analyze, you get them to summarize, you get them to do all of that. And of course, the objective of the assessment or the learning outcome that you are expecting to achieve, that has to be kept clearly in mind, right? And then you have to do two things. Okay, one is blueprinting as an exercise. You would have done that as B.Ed, but somewhere down the line, we keep forgetting about doing blueprinting and we leave that out. Okay, blueprinting is a must if you want to bring in evaluation and a balanced evaluation, especially if you're doing the HOTS and the LOTS, etc. So you have to figure out how many questions am I asking at the knowledge level? How many questions am I asking at the comprehension or the understanding level? How many questions am I asking at the application creation and all of that? Okay, so and what are the marks that I'm going to assign to that? Where will these questions come from in my text? So where will I find these questions? So if I have 3 chapters that I'm giving the questions from, what will be the weightage of each of these 3 chapters? And then within that weightage, how will I divide the marks for all of these cognitive levels as well? So if you see this example that I have given, this one is 8 for lots and 32 for hots. And within 32, application and analysis the highest. Synthesis, the teacher has decided not to give anything, and she's given 1 for evaluation as well. So you could decide what permutation combination you are doing, but making this blueprinting exercise is an important exercise to do, right? Now, the next thing, which is the last thing that I'll end with, is also when you are evaluating in class. So if you're evaluating higher order thinking in class and you're evaluating or as a formative or a summative assessment as well, if you're evaluating, you must have a rubric in place, which means that you need to figure out what is it that you are measuring, what points are you going to give under what circumstances. So what is the skill that you want the child to display if you want to give them 9 or 10 points or 6 or 8 points or lower points, right? So the rubric also has to be designed, whether you're doing a formative assessment or a summative assessment, right? With that, that's the piece that I wanted to do today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. I also wanted to leave you off with this. I think typed it out on chat earlier, but I'm sure in the emails it's got a little lost. So this is one of my favorite books that I use for deciding on examples on what one can use for higher order thinking or other thinking. Huge number of examples given for every level. Okay, so I'll leave you with the name of the book, because for each of the Bloom's taxonomy levels, they tell you what are the types of questions, the types of activities you can do in class, outside class, or whatever. So I think this is going to be useful for all of you if you're interested in it. Can I just leave you with the title, and then you can ask me any questions that you want me to answer. So this is called 50 Strategies to Boost Cognitive Engagement. That's the name of the book. And the author is a lady called Rebecca Soberg. Yeah, so hopefully you will find that book useful as well. Anything else that anyone else